we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. A lot to get to, but I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of interviews I had the chance to do over the last couple of days that I think you're going to be surprised. You know, we've been talking a lot about Islamification, not only of Texas, but the entire country, unfortunately, the entire world. I mean, we're watching it happen in Europe, watching it happen in Australia. And I had the chance to visit with a guy that did an incredible investigation a couple of decades ago. So some people saw this coming quite a while ago and took steps to try to stop it. And unfortunately, not enough of us were listening to that, including me. I've admitted that I should have been more focused on this issue. And definitely am awake now, believe me. But anyway, the story that I'm going to share in this first segment today is from a guy that wrote a book called Muslim Mafia. And I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things you hear, and I think awakened to the challenges that we now have in order to stop this and to keep the American value system intact. You know, we keep hearing the expression that Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. Most people will say Sharia is not compatible with Western civilization. I would go so far as to say Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. But this gentleman that did this, David Gaubatz is his name. And they literally, had guys infiltrate a mosque. They in America. This is not in the Middle East. It's not in some other country. This is right here in America. And I think it's going to surprise you. Let's jump into that interview right now.
David, thank you so much for coming on, sir.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Well, you wrote a book I guess it's 18 years ago now, 17 years ago, Muslim Mafia, Inside the Secret Underworld that's conspiring to Islamicize America. And a lot of people didn't take you serious. And here we are. We're now watching it happen. The background of this is quite amazing. And I would love to get your story for our listeners and just how this all came about.
Sure, no problem. This book actually came out in 2009. A little bit of a background. I had first started studying Islam in 1979 upon my first deployment to Saudi Arabia. And I continued up until this day, so about 45 years. In 2007, 2008, I was contacted by Frank Gaffney and his crew at the Center for Security Policy. And he was the Undersecretary of Defense for President Ronald Reagan. And he asked me at that time, he said, could I put together a team of about 6 people to go in CARE headquarters, Washington, D.C., for approximately 6 months to determine truly who CARE is. Are they friend or foe? And I did that. I said, yes, it would be difficult initially because you have to have the right people and you have to understand the security of CARE. And at the time, we had very little information about how CARE headquarters operates. So, Rick, what I had to do first would do some individual security tests within CARE, like sending individuals to the front door to see how hard it would be actually to even get into the lobby. And then what would be the process to put an intern or an employee inside. So that took a couple months before the actual operation even began.
And this was, what year was this that you did the undercover operation?
This was 2007, 2008 that I did the undercover operation. The book came out in 2009.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And I don't know if you know, Frank Gaffney now is working with us at Patriot Academy. He actually teaches our students and is working on a new effort essentially to inform the nation of a lot of the stuff that you discovered back then and how to respond to it. So amazing how these things come back around. So once you started doing that initial assessment, what did it take to actually get inside the operation?
Well, I knew from my experience with studying Islam that the key to getting inside an Islamic organization such as CARE, defined as Hamas Muslim Brotherhood, would be the individuals I chose would have to be people opposite from the way law enforcement go undercover. Because dealing with law enforcement, I was a federal agent for over 15 years. And undercover operations, say going into gangs or narcotics areas, an undercover officer has to have what we refer to as the gift of gab, to be able to just go in and talk, continuously. And that's how they get the people and gangs and narcotics operations to open up. To go inside, undercover inside an Islamic terror group, it requires just the opposite. You have to have someone who goes in, is very, very quiet, doesn't ask a lot of questions. And number one, they have to understand Sharia law, because that is the way to get in undercover. And that's what I trained before I put people undercover inside CARE headquarters. I trained my individuals simply to understand Sharia law, how to dress, the mannerisms, things to say, things not to say, things to do, things not to do. And for your audience who really maybe not understand Sharia law covers a Muslim's life 24 hours a day, everything they happen to do, from the way they eat, take a bath, go to sleep, prayers, physical jihad, laws within Sharia, the hudud, the punishment laws, what is a death penalty and what is not. An individual that goes undercover must fully understand Sharia. So the 6 people I picked to go undercover knew absolutely nothing about Islam. I mean, they could not define what Islam was. They had no idea what Sharia law was. So day one, I taught them Sharia accordance, how to act and behave inside like CARE headquarters. So that was a couple months process there. So they went in 2007 and stayed approximately 6 months. During that time, my son, Chris, was the lead researcher, and he and his team were able to get approximately 13,000 documents out of CARE, documents that CARE was in the process of shredding that contained criminal information about their activities, such as their support for Al-Qaeda, Hamas, etc. So we got 13,000 documents out. And it lasted approximately 6 months. And eventually, about a year later, ended up writing the book Muslim Mafia.
And in the book, you basically lay out their game plan for, domination, essentially. I mean, to the Islamification of America, and warn people about what was coming.
Yeah, Rick, and exactly. And being a former federal agent, I only rely on firsthand evidence. So it wasn't my opinions. It was what documents we found, plus what they personally discussed, is what the book is all about. It's based on firsthand evidence, not just personal opinion. And I can tell everyone now that CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is not a peace-loving, assimilating organization that wants to follow the U.S. Constitution and America. They're exactly opposite. CARE is headquarters Hamas and friends with Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hezbollah, etc.
Now 17 years later, what do you recommend? Everybody's kind of scrambling right now. There are a lot of people waking up to the problem. Obviously, the problem is 1,000 times worse than it was in 2009. When you look at the landscape, what do you recommend that we need to do?
Well, something that I wrote in actually 2007, and people can look this up if they just Google Gaubatz sleeper cells. I wrote an extensive article in 2007 talking about the sleeper cells, Islamic sleeper cells, scattered all across America. And since I have been in 425 mosques, I can tell you firsthand that we have tens of thousands of sleeper cells ready to partake on the ideology of, in this instance today, Iran, but ISIS, Al Qaeda, whatever. We have Sunni and Shiite sleeper cells, and they are just waiting, for the word, which they got the partial clearance from the Ayatollah in Iran, and we've seen 3 or 4 sleeper cell type terrorist activities in the U.S. plus across the world. I can tell people that they need to be prepared. Prepare your families, because one can only imagine 9/11 was awful, but could you imagine 10 9/11s going across America at the same time? And something, Rick, that I'm told by imams as I go across the U.S., I've asked them, why haven't we had another 9/11 such attack in America? Now, we've had individuals like the Boston bombing,
Right.
etc., but why have we not had another 9/11? And over again, the Islamic leaders tell me, they say, Dave, they call me Daoud, my Arabic name. They say, Dave, right now in America, we, meaning the Islamic ideology, is winning in America. It would set them back 25 years to have another 9/11 type of attack in America. They don't need it right now. They have enough what they call lone wolf sleeper cells to keep the terror in the hearts of the American people. And right now, they're not ready for another 9/11, but when they feel that it's needed, they are very capable of carrying it out.
That confirms so much what we have been saying from the standpoint of they don't need or want a kinetic jihad. They're winning the cultural jihad, and if they go kinetic, that riles us up, right? That wakes up more Americans. Like you're saying, it would set them back because it would draw the line clearly. Whereas the cultural jihad, they're able to fool most Americans into thinking we're just here, because we want freedom and we all want to get along. And that game is that they're playing that game well, and frankly, they're winning at that right now.
They're winning, and they know that. And something, when I was in Iraq in 2003 at the beginning of the war, I had the opportunity as a federal agent to interview dozens of Al Qaeda and Saddam Fedayeen terrorists. And one of the questions I would ask them, I asked them, what is going to be the next type of attacks in America aside from a 9/11 type of attack? And over again, Rick, I was told by Islamic terrorists that the next type of attack, they're going to go after the hearts of the American people. And I wanted them to clarify that. And they said the hearts of the American people are the children of Americans, and that is who is going to be targeted next by Islamic terrorists. Now, keep in mind, this was 2003. And they haven't further clarified. They said it doesn't mean physical attacks initially. They were going to go after the hearts and minds of our children and then turn them against their own parents, turn them against America. And right now, if we look back, right now, they're doing that, and they've done a very good job of it in our colleges, everywhere from elementary schools all the way through universities. So they said when it is time, they will conduct physical jihad against our children. But right now, they are going after the hearts and the mind, because they say America can be destroyed from within, and it's going to be the younger generation that does that.
Wow. It's so true too. I mean, even now we're fighting in Texas over textbooks and Islamic calendars and getting all kinds of holidays and things into like you're saying, the hearts and minds of the kids, and getting them to sympathize and frankly even convert in large numbers. So it's real. And I guess the first step really is the wake-up call. It's why you wrote the book 17 years ago, is to get people educated on this and get them willing to take action and not not just sit back and watch it happen. I think do you feel like, David, are we improving on our strategy at all? I mean, like, are we starting to get our feet under us and start to realize here's some ways we can push back and fight, peacefully within this, fight the cultural jihad? All right, before David answers that question, we got to take a quick break. You're listening to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildmon and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started continues today as AFA fights the attack against truth and righteousness. Watch Culture Warrior and join the fight. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
We're back on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach, jumping right back into my interview with David Gaubatz, author of Muslim Mafia.
Are we starting to get our feet under us and start to realize here's some ways we can push back and fight, peacefully within this, fight the cultural jihad?
No, I have to say that from what I've seen in 45 years of studying Islamic matters, overseas, like in Iran, Iraq, and Syria, etc., we are doing an outstanding job of fighting Islamic-based terrorism. President Trump is probably the best president we've ever had to go after them. But inside America, I see it all across from the east to the west coast. We are doing a very, very poor job because they are attacking our children openly in America. And I'll give an example real quick of something that's going on that I see in almost every mosque. We talk about child marriages within Islam. Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old girl, Aisha, and did awful things to that young lady for many, many years, that young child. So when I go to mosque, I'll try to find out anything I can pertaining to child marriages at the mosque. I went to one in Nashville, and I've been to dozens like this, similar to Nashville. And inside the mosque, they were having a 2-week Sharia course. Myself and a female researcher were in the mosque as Muslims, which I'm not Muslim, but we were going through Sharia classes. And sitting beside us was a little girl about 7 years old. And she told my female researcher, she said, "Ma'am, my arms are hurting. My back is hurting. Can you help me?" And my researcher said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And the little girl raised her sleeves and showed her welts on her arms and back. And she said that Islamic leaders beat them when they don't do Sharia correctly. And then the little girl, remember, 7 years old, she told me and my female researcher, she said, "And my husband does this to me, and my husband does that."
Wow.
That was sad. I called timeout at that point. I immediately went to the sheriff's department, the police department, contacted the FBI, congressmen from the left and the right. And Rick, it literally took me months and months before Child Protective Services went in that mosque. They did protect that one girl, and my understanding, others who were also being abused, and they ended up closing that mosque in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, that mosque originated from Minnesota. It was a Somalian mosque, and a group of approximately 100 Muslim men and their wives moved to Nashville to set up an organization there. And I can tell you from the 425 mosques I've been to that child marriages are being advocated right here in the United States of America, and we have no one who's willing to step up and protect those innocent girls.
So David, I mean, that sounds like it did work, but only because you had infiltrated, only because you were in there and able to hear that girl's cry for help. And I just have to assume then that in mosques all over the country, that's still occurring, and there's no one that's infiltrated. There's no one there to hear that little girl's cry for help. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, and that goes back to what you said. What are we doing in America? Are we doing enough? If I can go in there as a private citizen and obtain that information within a few days, and I can go to almost any mosque in America and get that type of information within a few hours, why or law enforcement not inside these mosques getting the same information. It's very, very clear what's going on. It would be very easy to do with just a small amount of training that myself or others could provide to law enforcement. But politically, they are not allowed to go into the mosque to do any type of investigation. And I have to relate this to what we saw in Iraq in 2003. Remember, I was a civilian at that time, civilian federal agent, and we were told you cannot go in mosques, you cannot go in hospitals, you cannot go in schools. They were off limits anywhere else. So what did we do? We went in mosques, schools, and hospitals, and that's exactly where we found the Islamic terrorists hiding. And we found the weapons inside the mosque and the schools and the hospitals. Same things going on here in the U.S. Mosques are essentially safe houses for Islamic terror cells, sleepers, and to as many headquarters across the United States. They have over 3,500 mosques. And I've been told by many Islamic leaders, these are safe houses. Something I need to add real quick, and I can't go into great detail right now, Rick, but I can tell you the Attorney General's office in Texas are doing an outstanding job at trying to get a hold of all of this. I've been in Zoom meetings over the last couple of weeks a couple times, and they are pursuing criminal activity at some of the mosques across Texas.
It sounds almost like when we talk about solutions and things we need to be doing to combat this, that one of the big ones is going to be really changing our perspective on local law enforcement. Sheriff's departments are going to have to get better and better trained on this and almost have, literally create departments within that department that this is their focus. I mean, we're talking 2,000, 300 or 400 actual mosques in Texas now. 2,000, I'm told by our mutual friend Frank Gaffney, if you count their version of a home church where they're beginning them in communities and not yet having buildings. I can't imagine there's going to be a county unaffected. So it's just going to have to become a huge part of our law enforcement efforts.
Exactly. And I lived in Texas for about 7 years total. I've probably been to 100 plus mosques in Texas, and I've also trained every Texas state trooper back in the early 2000s. They were required to go to my classes, and I trained them exactly how to go undercover to do this type activity. Yet we have good law enforcement on the ground, street level, but their hands are actually handcuffed because once it gets into any type of investigation, it immediately goes to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is led by the FBI. Inside of America, our law enforcement are not allowed to go in mosques. It would have to be an active type shooter situation before they would be allowed to do so. But otherwise, they have free reign to do what they want in America.
Yeah, that's got to change. Man, it's got to change. And I think it's going to require a lot of education just on what freedom of religion really is. And when something's subverting the public good, that it's not protected by the First Amendment. And that's a big shift in the American mindset that's going to take time.
Well, if we would just listen to them, Rick, because I asked Islamic leaders to define what Islam is, and they kind of laugh and smirk sometimes. They say, first of all, Islam is not a religion. This is not what my opinion I'm coming up with. This is what I'm told by imams all across America and all through the Middle East for my 45 years plus. They define Islam as a political, economic, and military ideology that uses religion as a tool to achieve their goals. And their goal is to form an Islamic Ummah nation worldwide under Sharia law. They are the first in their materials and in their lectures to tell their worshipers they are not a religion.
Wow.
So that should be enough for us right there.
Wow. That's so, yeah. I mean, in their own words. Is that in your book, what you just mentioned?
It may be in my book. It's in some of the documents that I've got, the 13,000 documents, but it's in all kinds of material that I've got from the 425 mosques I've been in.
Man, I want to follow up with you on that. That's exactly the kind of, intellectual ammunition that we need to win this. David, we got to have you back. Thank you so much for continuing to pursue this, you and your son both, and thank you for coming on air with us and helping to alert the American people and our listeners. I look forward to having you back and having further discussions. I appreciate you, sir.
Thank you, Rick, and pass on my best to Frank Gaffney and David Yerushalmi. They're great people.
I will, absolutely. And by the way, the book, Amazon, is that the best place for us to send? I know it's available on Audible as well for those that prefer to listen.
Yes, Amazon's probably the best place.
That was David Gaubatz, author of Muslim Mafia. I recommend everybody get that. And man, you need a heads up. We've got to start getting educated on this, and we've got to start pushing back. We've got to start having some good strategic plans for doing so, which, to be honest, we don't have yet. So it's time for a lot of folks to start, as George Bush would have said, putting together some strategery. All right. So, you got to laugh through these tough issues. That's just the way you got to do it. Okay. I've got another guest for you today, Brandon Hall from the State Board of Education in Texas. This was a very important fight. Last week, if you're not familiar with how the education, how the textbooks typically work in the education system for the public schools, most states have a state board of education that sets the policy for how the textbooks are going to be written, what the standards are going to be. Basically, what are the things we're going to teach in our public schools? What are the standards? What do you want people to know when they graduate from a public high school? So after they've done K through 12. Well, in Texas, we've got this state board of education that is very split, Republican majority, but not a solid conservative majority like we see in a lot of our legislatures. And it's been a fight every time social studies comes around. We're fighting over getting good history back into the classroom. Civics used to be just a given. We taught civics in our schools as one of the main reasons why we even have schools. In fact, if you go to the Texas Constitution, the very reason for public schools is to have an informed citizenry that will know how to vote, that will know how to preserve the culture, preserve the free market economy, preserve the constitutional republic. You got to have an educated citizenry to do that. That's why we have public schools across the country. And most state constitutions have very similar language in there. Well, the State Board of Education is tasked with designing that curriculum, or at least setting the standards for it, and then adopting textbooks that other people put together. And most of the country adopts textbooks that are put together by Texas or California because we spend so much money doing that. Well, anyway, last week at the State Board of Education, there was a big fight over whether or not to have in the reading list for kids all kinds of Bible stories. So incredible that we're going to get all these Bible stories back into the classroom, and then all kinds of great, biographies of American heroes, of people in history that had a tremendous impact on who we are as a nation. All of this was being fought over. You would think you wouldn't have to fight over that. You would think people would want the classroom to be teaching young people to treat their neighbor the way they want to be treated, to be the good Samaritan, to not steal, to not, those basic biblical values that make a good society. But no, believe it or not, even out of the Christian, quote unquote, Christian community, you have a lot of woke, what John Cooper used to call in his book, wimpy, weak, and woke pastors and others that, no, they don't want those things taught. They actually think that a neutral, secular, no value system, education system is going to produce good citizens. We know that not to be the case. And they're actually okay with teaching Islam and all of these other things. So it was weird, I'll be honest with you, to be there and listen to some of the testimony that took place with what people actually think and what they want in the classroom. But fortunately, we rallied a ton of people to go down there, had a major pushback, stood behind these State Board of Education members that are, working to get the good stuff in, and ended up with some tremendous victories. But it was touch and go. I mean, it was very, very close. Like, we were talking day after day about an 8-7 vote, and that it could go either way. There's 15 members of this board, so pretty dramatic, pretty high, well, very high stakes. I mean, this is, even if you homeschool or you private school, look, I was homeschooled, private school, and public school. I did them all three myself, but with our kids, we homeschooled them all the way through. I frankly have been very public about that, and that I think that is the best option. I think any parent that possibly can do that should do that. I think most people can do it with major sacrifice. Some it often takes, but anyway, that is definitely the best route. Private school being the second best route, and then you still got 80% of the kids in public schools. So even if you do private school or homeschooling, and if I do that, your neighbors, your future neighbors, are being educated in the public school. So you should still want to influence that. You should still want the textbooks and the curriculum and the environment in the public schools to be as good as possible, because that's our culture, that's our country, unfortunately. And so we're very involved in these battles, and you should be excited about the victories that took place last week, because it's going to take some time. I mean, these won't even be in the classroom. The textbooks that will be created as a result of these standards that the State Board of Education is voting on will not be created for, another year or two, won't be in the classroom for another 3, maybe 4 or 5 years. But this is how it works. And so you got to plan ahead. You got to prepare for this. And I think there's more and more of an appetite among the American people for restoring American exceptionalism, for getting back to these things that make a good culture and make a good society. And this is where that fight is fought at the very most grassroots level and most ground level. And the cool thing I think you'll take away from this program today is that it works, that the system does work if we work the system. And so this is one of those examples where, you have to be involved in this years ago, getting good candidates to run for the State Board of Education, getting good candidates to learn this process really well, getting people very involved in the curriculum standards and writing, good textbooks. I mean, all of that takes time. It takes years to build that. And then you got to have the networks. You got to have the Constitution coaches and all the things we do at Patriot Academy, and be ready to be on call when this kind of thing happens. So we were able to show up at the State Board of Education with about 100 people, and we were, people were wearing our shirts that say "Be Jefferson, defend freedom, and defeat Sharia." And so it was very obvious to the members of the board that were maybe not so solid, that they had a lot of people out there that were going to hold them accountable. So Brandon Hall will be with me when we come back from the break. He'll be talking about what happened at the State Board and what comes next. So stay with us. You're listening to At the Core with Wildmon and Rick Green.
We live in an ever-changing culture that continues to fall away from its moral foundations. The Stand provides a Christian perspective on current issues that are important to your family. Produced by the American Family Association, this monthly magazine is full of articles and stories about people who are making a difference in their community and around the world. Sign up today and receive a free 6-month subscription. Visit thestand.net or call 1-800-326-4543.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with me here on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach. We got Brandon Hall with us. We're talking about the State Board of Education fight that happened last week, and Brandon Hall was right there in the middle of it.
You did, just by the way, an amazing job. I went down there to testify, and man, Brandon, I watched you ask questions and respond, and just masterful, respectful. It was some of the best civil discourse I've seen in a long time. Brandon, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I'm really excited about some of the big wins that we had last week by the grace of God, and ready to talk about them.
It was a touch and go kind of thing for a while there. It looked like it was going to be a really, really close vote, possibly that we were going to lose a lot of the good stuff that y'all been working on for the curriculum standards, and just great victories by the end of the week. So let's dive in. Would you explain a little bit about what these are? What does it mean when we say the standards or the reading list?
Yeah, well, and I'm glad that you brought them both up, because we had two big simultaneous wins, which is that the State Board of Education gave initial approval both to, first of all, an incredible set of social studies standards that are Texas and America and Western civilization focused. And we bring back a lot of great factual history that had been kind of through revisionism throughout the years taken out of our classrooms, that are big, significant parts of America and even world history. And then at the same time, we also gave initial approval to a required literary works list to where we'll bring a lot of the great classics back into our classrooms in the state of Texas, and even key passages of the Bible that are sort of foundational passages. And so that's a lot we've seen for quite a while. We've seen more modern works come into our classrooms that are a lot more shallow than the classics. And so that was also a huge win to see both of those things happen at the same time.
And this will affect, we've got audience all over the country, and they need to know what you guys do on the State Board of Education in Texas affects most of these other states, because it's so expensive to do this process. By the time you do the textbooks, a lot of the other states, they just say, man, we're going to pick up what Texas did. So this is a national impact you guys are having.
That's for sure. A lot of it goes back to the market share in the textbook industry. Texas has the second largest market for textbooks. And so you'll have California will be the first largest market. So a lot of the blue states will follow what California does. And, up to 20 red states usually are closely following Texas because those textbook companies can sell textbooks there as well. And so what we do here is really going to set the standard across the country. And especially with those social studies standards, we're really pioneering, how to teach history in a chronological manner across the story arc of history. And we're the first state to really pick that up.
Cool. Well, and so many great things that you guys got back in. And honestly, we were thinking when we came down and testified and rallied all these people, we're just hoping to stop bad amendments. You guys actually ended up getting some good amendments in. It actually got better by the end of the week. What happened?
Yeah, we really, rather than just being on the defensive, we went on the offense. And a lot of that was because, Texas patriots really showed up and roared like a lion. And we really heard, both sides. A lot of times we hear from the left because the left tends to be very organized through a lot of their Soros-funded nonprofits. And so a lot of times that's the only voice that we hear working in government. But this time we heard from patriots, just grassroots patriots from across the state of Texas that wanted good factual history. And I think that gave, us the courage that we needed to really go on the offense. And so we were able to put in some great amendments. I mean, we're talking about things that have been left out of history for a long time, like the role of the Great Awakening in the independence movement in the colonies, the role of the Black Robe Regiment in the Revolution, the fact that our Pilgrim ancestors came here to advance the Christian faith. Those are some of the great amendments that we got passed. And I have to give a lot of credit to my Republican colleagues and especially Julie Pickering on proposing some of those amendments. And it was amazing to just see them pass.
I love that you said the Great Awakening, because, the movie A Great Awakening came out a couple of weeks ago. And so what great timing for y'all to get that into the textbooks. That's really cool. What about so like on the reading list, when I was there, I was hearing so many people get up and say, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't want the Bible in the classroom or a teacher having influence on the Bible. I mean, it was, they know how the left knows how to act like they're, our people and somehow against what we're for. And you just did a masterful job of picking that apart. But I was getting worried that there was so much of that. And I guess y'all are used to that. Like you said, the left shows up. But it seems like you were able to keep all of that in. Teaching kids the Good Samaritan and all kinds of other great principles that come from the Bible.
Yeah, well, think about it, Rick, and I want the audience to think about it. Why did we ever stop teaching the best-selling book of all time as a work of literature?
Yeah.
It really doesn't make any sense. And when we're looking at these other key classical works of literature that, have really shaped our country, the Bible is the most referenced work of literature by other works of literature. And so it's really, of course, we believe that it's truth and we believe that it's profitable for everyone. And that's one of the questions that I was asking to some of our testifiers that would say that they were a pastor or a Christian, but they were against teaching the Bible in schools. Well, don't we believe that it's profitable for everyone? And we believe that it's truth. And that's why it's had such a big impact on Western civilization and especially America, and the levels of prosperity and freedom that we see in America. That's not by accident. That's because our nation was founded on the truth of God's word and these key principles. And so it's actually impossible to have a complete education without understanding these key passages from the Bible that have really shaped the world that we live in, and especially America and the state of Texas.
Amen. Oh, so good. Talk to us a little bit about process. So you guys have had this vote last week. What happens next?
Well, I thank you for bringing that up, because it's very important that your audience continues to stay engaged with what's coming next. this was first reading and filing authorization. So it's initial approval. And I don't want to take away from the big win that happened, because once you get those things established, we're in a really good position moving to the next stage. But we have one final step, which is what we passed this last week with the literary works list and the social studies standards. Will come back to the board in June for final approval. And so we just need everyone to stay locked in, stay engaged. And I think that prayer was such an important part of the first stage, because when you're talking about bringing key passages from the Word of God back into classrooms for the first time in 60 years, I'll tell you, that wasn't just, something that we're able to do politically. That was God working and moving in hearts. And so I really want everybody to continue to pray and to continue to stay engaged for June.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, we'll certainly remind the audience. Brandon, tell us a little bit about you, man. People don't realize when you run for State Board of Education in Texas, you've got more than twice the constituency of a congressman, and you got a massive district. This is a difficult race to win. It's hard to raise money because it's a tough race, but it is so important. And I think David Barton's been involved in State Board of Education races since, goodness, the 80s, maybe. I know in the 90s for sure. So we've always thought it was important, but most people don't pay attention to it. Anyway, so you've got a very important position there in the state of Texas. You're also a pastor, which I think is totally cool. We need more pastors serving in public office like this. So what got you engaged?
Well, I never saw myself running for the State Board of Education. That was nothing that I ever aspired to. But I really felt called by the Lord to get into the race initially. And then once I got in, just door after door opened up in front of me. And a lot of people would have said, well, you're not a classroom teacher. How can you be involved in public education? But I think it was really important to have a good outside voice also involved in the process. It's good to have expertise from teachers, but you need an outsider sometimes. And so God just really opened up every door in front of us in an incredible way that, almost surprised everybody, including me. And I think that, God has me here for such a time as this, but I am privileged also to pastor a local church. He's in a little town called Springtown. And I'm so thankful for it. And actually, when I was running for office, one of the promises that I made on the campaign trail, I tried to be careful about making too many promises. But one of the things that I did say is that I knew social studies standards were coming up. And that was kind of the real important thing. And I told everyone that if they would elect me, if David Barton would consider serving, I would definitely appoint him to be an expert content advisor. And so that was one of the highlights of my career on the SBOE so far, is being able to make that happen.
That's amazing. Oh, so cool. So cool. And I'll tell you, it came in strategically handy several times during the testimony, because there were these, liberal groups that got up and I'm a pastor and and you asked some great questions that you were able to say as a pastor. It was great. So God used it in a really cool way as well during the testimony. So, well, man, what's your term like? When are you up again?
Well, I would be up in 2028. So I'm still in the second year of my term right now.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And I understand another pastor won a primary somewhere up in the Dallas area. I can't remember the district. So they'll be with you starting in January. So then we'll have two pastors on the State Board of Education. It'll be amazing. Man, we're just so thankful for you, Brandon. Thank you for the hard work you've been doing. Thanks for sharing the victory with us. And one other thing before I let you go. I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit long here, but it sounded like you also got some of the real history of Islam into the standards as well, which is, the fact that Muhammad, was, a pedophile, married the 6-year-old and all of the things that people don't know. You just basically got some amendments in that said, hey, if we got this increased Muslim population and people are talking about this, they need to know the history here. Is that true? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, it is true that we made a lot of progress, again, going on the offensive, not just keeping indoctrination out, but, telling some of the real history. And here's why I thought that was really important, because this is, the fastest growing religion in the world. And, according to the demographers, it's supposed to be the number one religion in the world and by 2070. And so I think such a significant religion. And then you have the founder, Muhammad, is one of the most pivotal characters in history, and really his teachings and his followers have really shaped, so much of our history. Even to this day, we're in a conflict with Iran. It really could go back to a lot of those teachings. And so I think that it's important for our students to understand who founded this religion and what did he believe, and then how have those beliefs influenced our history. And so that is an amendment that I made to talk a little bit about Muhammad. That one did not pass this time, but we did get some good references when we talk about terrorism, especially on 9/11. We were able to add in that it was Islamic terrorism. How could you understand 9/11 without understanding that? And then we also talked about how jihad, this is one that did pass, that the teachings of jihad influenced the expansion of Islam and also the conquering of Christian lands.
Wow, that's good. Okay, well, cool. Well, at least we got some of that in there. So important to the conversation, like you said, as this is exploding across the world and now in the U.S. as well. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. Brandon, we're going to have to get you back, man. And do you know the dates for June? Can we go ahead and tell people about that, or is that set yet?
We still need to figure out when the public testimony and everything will be for June. So I would say just stand by for those dates.
You got it. All right, Brandon Hall from the State Board of Education in Texas. Appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, there you have it, folks. I mean, that's a perfect example of what happens when we do get involved, when we pay attention to these issues, when we study to show ourselves approved, as it says in Timothy, and that we're ready to answer. I wish, in fact, we could, I guess, but we just don't have the time. I could play for you some of the civil discourse that took place at the State Board, and the ability that Brandon had to give an answer and to respond and to, be ready for that fight, and then to speak with all boldness. I mean, I just think he's a fantastic example of the type of public servants that we need out there. So it's why we do what we do at Patriot Academy in terms of training up young men and women to be able to be good citizens, to be what we call biblical citizens, and then to engage in these things. And a lot of those graduates, Brandon's not one of our graduates, but a lot of our graduates are doing exactly what he's doing. They're on state boards, they're in local school boards, they're in Congress, they're in state legislatures, and they're doing exactly what Brandon did so well last week. They're going into these debates and into these legislative halls and into these situations, having done the hard work to be ready to answer, to actually, win the debate, not with just shouting people down like the left does. And we saw some of that even last week, not with, sarcasm and just, trying to score political points or debate points, but actually having good civil discourse with good reasoning and logic and history and having the facts on your side. And I saw so much of that from Brandon and from Julie Pickren. They were the two stalwarts that really led the way. Other good members of the board, but I mean, those two really took on this fight. And I think we'll try to get Julie on the program as well in the next week or two, because there's still a lot, as Brandon was saying, this is not over. There's still a lot to do. And I just think the whole story and what's happening in Texas with the State Board of Education will hopefully be inspiring to you all over the country to do similar things. I was, in fact, if you're wondering where to start, the best place to start is patriotacademy.com. Go sign up to be a Constitution coach and host a class in your living room. And I'll give you an example. A guy called several years ago and had created a class in his state, and only one person signed up. One person. And he called our office and said, should we still do the class with one person? And one of our super coaches told him, of course, Rick always says sloppy success is better than perfect nothing. That's one of the things I encourage people to do, is just get out there and do it and figure it out and do it poorly until you can do it well. And so this guy has the class with this one guest, one person in his class. That one person ends up right after the class is over, getting a call on the governor appointed them to their State Board of Education. And then a couple of more students took the class that got elected to the State Board of Education. And then a year later, this took over the course of 3 or 4 years, a fourth member of that State Board of Education, 4 out of 7, came through our Constitution classes and got elected. So what an amazing story. Now, good things happening there. So just know, you start with one person, and then multiply. You can double and get one other person to come take a class with you, and then triple, and you know how it goes from there. Anyway, I hope you're encouraged today. Hope you'll get out there and make a difference. Thanks for listening to At the Core.